Welcome to F101 with Friends, your pit stop for all things Formula One. Whether you're here for the stats, the memes, or just figuring out what a chicane is, we've got you covered. Buckle up, because the fun starts right now. Hi everyone, my name is Nisha, a newbie F1 girlie who is desperate to make more friends so that I can talk about this sport all the time. Each week, a new guest will join me on this journey, from seasoned F1 fans to other curious newcomers, and we will explore what it is about this million-dollar sport at gravity-defying speeds that we just can't stop watching. We'll try to break it all down in a way that's fun, relatable, and hopefully try to explain some of the tech talk. We are on our way to the crown jewel of F1, the original glamorous race, and the one that is considered to be very, very prestigious. Yes, I am talking about the Monaco Grand Prix. And to take us on this journey, I have actually enlisted the help of Kevin and Aswathy to do this episode. Why? Because I'm actually still traveling. So, Kevin and Aswathy, over to you.
Thank you so much for having us, Nish. This is the second time that I am on the podcast, and we also have Ashwathi with us. Hey, Ashwathi.
Hey, bonjour. Hey, it's my second time too. I feel like we should be sipping Mai Tais while discussing this episode because it just feels apt for Monaco.
We should also be on a yacht. I don't think we have a yacht budget yet.
I have a bathtub. Maybe that works. I have a bathtub.
Oh, okay. I mean, apples and oranges, my friend. Apples and oranges. So that was a crazy weekend that we had at Imola. What are your highlights and lowlights, Ashwathi? Let's quickly go over that before we step into this next episode.
Imola was exciting, but I think the only highlight, I mean, there are many highlights, but the highlight is Max Verstappen at turn 2. I mean, every time I feel like, oh, it's Max Verstappen, he comes back and says, it's Max Verstappen. I thought the turn 2 move was absolutely beautiful. It showed us who he is, we always knew. And I think the McLarens were great. Lando had good recovery. With the Ferraris, Lewis, I think, managed the best of what he could do, but Charles got screwed over on multiple occasions. And great drive from Albon. I think those were my highlights. Lowlights, I think Kimi Antonelli being his home race and whatnot. He brought his school friends and all of that.
Right.
I just felt like that crash was a bit of an ouchie.
Yeah.
But maybe with Toto Wolff coming back next week, he'll have somebody to watch over him.
Right. Okay. All right. That sounds fair. Yeah.
What do you think?
I totally agree with the whole Kimi Antonelli bit. I mean, I obviously feel bad for the guy, you know. I actually remember reading somewhere that he'd bought everybody out just to kind of show them what goes on behind the scenes in F1, you know, just to...
To show.
To give them a sense of...
He was
to
flexing.
give them a sense of perspective into what it is that he does. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a win any day, you know. It's a win any day. I also did see a statement in there where he was like, he was aiming to get a few more people interested in F1, and given the trajectory...
That's nice.
No, I think given the amount of time that it takes to get into F1, because you got to go karting and, you know, work your way up the ranks and all. I mean, I'm not saying it's too late, but yeah, I think they must have...
I thought watching F1. At this point, they can watch F1. I don't think they can be in it. Like, not to quash anyone's hope.
Yeah,
But yeah, just with the crowd, I thought, like, since Ferrari wasn't really Ferrari, Kimi Antonelli was like the second hope.
Very true.
But
yeah,
it is what it is.
It is what it is indeed. The highlights that I'd had, I was obviously happy to see Max back on the podium again. It feels like it's been a while, but if you honestly think about it, it hasn't been that long. But
Yep.
you know, given the performance of his that we are used to, it genuinely feels like it's been a while. And I think
Yeah.
this race has kind of given me some hope, because
Yeah.
if these upgrades are actually real, we've got a 3-way title fight. And that's going to be super interesting going to this triple header that we're moving into. I mean, I feel bad about McLaren and their pit stops because I necessarily don't feel like they had the best pit stops, which kind of did hamper their chances.
With the pit stops, I think Lando had the
Yeah.
worst luck by pitting just before the virtual safety car. And Max was just like, the gods were on his side on that weekend, man. There's
Very
no,
true,
no
very
other
true.
way to.
Also, shout out to the team Williams. Like, Albon has been having a great season so far. I think he's just 3 points away this season from making more points than he did, I think, from 22 to 24.
Wow.
And that's a crazy stat because he's been consistent. He's been absolutely consistent this season, as has his teammate. So that's a great sign for them. Obviously, respect where respect's due. Lewis Hamilton found his kind of pace and he kind of stuck his boots into the ground and, he ended up where exactly he needed to. So
Yeah.
seeing the qualifying, I was worried about the chance of there being a red flag, but everybody kind of held their ground during the race and, it went off without too much incident. So it was a pretty good race. But if this is an indicator of anything, Monaco is going to be super exciting given how narrow the road is and how twisty and turny the track is. We're going to see a lot of risky kind of attempts being made, and
Yeah.
it's going to end up paying off for the drivers as well as us, the viewers.
I hope so. I hope, like, I'm not hoping for red flags, but the way it's going and how competitive the cars are right now, I think it's going to be exciting. At least better than the 2024 one, but we'll get into that. But just want to, let's do like a quick lowdown on Monaco. So, as you know, the Monaco Grand Prix, along with the Indy 500 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans, are considered to be the triple crown of motorsport. As of 2023, Graham Hill is the only driver to have won the Triple Crown by winning all three. I'm sure Max wants this too.
Of course.
And Monaco, yes, he wants everything. And Monaco is iconic, lots of celebrities, international exposure. Like, even the Prince of Monaco shows up at the event. And the whole city is just like 2.5 miles or something, right? So everyone gets involved.
Of course.
And you can see like people cheering from their balconies as the car zoom past and just cheering extra hard, of course, because they do have Charles Leclerc, their own son or whatever. So it's really passionate race weekend, and yeah, happy to see Charles there.
I'm sure that as much as Charles is their own kind of hometown hero, there are a lot of, I think a fair majority of the F1 drivers have made Monaco their
Yep.
home for tax reasons.
Yes.
Right? So
Of course.
yeah,
Of
and
course.
I would imagine the whole city being involved because technically the racetrack does run a fair way through
the
the city.
city.
Yeah. So it's literally in your backyard.
Yeah. Like, I had literally nothing else they can do that weekend.
I wouldn't be surprised if I see like a Deliveroo driver on the track out on his way to make a delivery, but so far I don't think we've seen that on the broadcast. But back to the track, here are some quick facts about this race. The first race was held in 1950 as part of the inaugural F1 championship. Drivers will do around 78 laps around this tiny 3.37 kilometer circuit. It has about 19 corners.
Okay.
And the current record is a staggering 1 minute 12.909. That was set by Lewis Hamilton in 2021.
Nice.
I think that this is the season that we're seeing a lot of the previous year records being broken. So if there's any year for us to see a record being broken, I feel like it is this one.
Let's go, Max.
So I am super excited about that, but it's so close. Like, you're so close to the edge that once, slip up and you're gonna be swimming with the fishes.
That's pretty dark, but okay.
I mean, they do have rescue swimmers on staff, which is something we will get to
Yeah.
at the rest of this episode. But this street circuit is the shortest in the calendar, and it has the lowest average speed of all the circuits in F1. It requires its own special sporting regulations to limit the total race distance to 260 rather than the 305 that all the other circuits have.
It's also because the track is just so tiny, and like the cars right now are, let's call it, massive, and So it's a very unique track. There's not really much overtaking that happens on track.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you got to look at qualifying like a mini race in itself and bring
Absolutely.
that excitement for the quali, because
Absolutely.
people like the drivers have to push to the absolute limit while trying to avoid crashing into the barriers, because this is where the quali probably decides the race when it comes to Monaco. What do you
True.
think?
Absolutely. I agree with you. But when you kind of mention it right now, and you kind of talked about how tight the track is, I know this is very wishful thinking, but can you imagine if we got a sprint race weekend in Monaco? Oh, that would be something. Like we would get two qualifyings and technically two
Yes.
races for the price of one. That would be something, right? Imagine
I
having to go around the track twice for qualifying, as well as like two races. Ooh, that would get the viewership up.
I can just imagine all the race engineers praying, please don't crash the fucking car. I can't fix it on time. I feel bad for them. But talking about Monaco, they're trying to make it more exciting. This year, there's going to be mandatory two pit stops. I remember some people slept in front of the TV last year, so the regular races have a mandatory one pit stop where you have to change the tire compounds, meaning you started on hards, then you have to switch to softs or mediums at some point.
Right.
But in Monaco, just to make things more fun, the teams do it twice in one race. So a lot of it is strategy and it could make or break a race.
Absolutely. That's going to be super interesting. And I know Nisha likes to do water track looks like. And I've been staring at this track for the past 20 minutes and I have no idea what to compare it to.
It's a bit weird, but if you like zoom out and squint in like an angle, like I want to be sophisticated and say it looks like a musical note. I think it's called a quaver. You know that loopy thingy?
Okay, that's actually what the musical note emoji is, right? So I guess it makes sense. It is Charles Leclerc's home, so fancy people a
Yes.
lot of glam. So I guess it does add up.
If you look at the note itself, still squinting,
Mm-hmm.
the start finish rate is where the stem of the note starts. There's like a
Right.
long, narrow stem running up one side and a loop that
Okay.
curls out and comes back in before flicking upwards into a sharp little flag.
You actually might be onto something there. I'm going to use this analogy from now on. What was it called again? A quaver.
A quaver. You should bring it into conversations.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, it's going to make me sound a lot more refined, but I guess we'll find a way to weasel it in.
Let's talk about the sectors too, right? It's amazing. Like the sector one, which is like your turns 1 to 4, you have your Saint Devant to okay. Firstly, there's a lot of French names with Monaco. I'm probably gonna mispronounce all of them because I'm not French, but I will try my absolute best.
Okay, for somebody who started off the podcast speaking
That's the
French,
only French I know.
you have a little bit of wiggle room, my friend. Okay.
I've exhausted my French vocabulary with Bonjour.
Okay, we will let it slide this
Okay.
time. All right, but we're gonna get you in for one of those French heavy episodes the next time, and you're gonna have to do all of it with a French accent, right?
It's it, let's just completely ignore the fact that I live in Quebec and I don't know a word of French.
I did not want to dox you, but you've done it yourself, so there you go. Right.
Yes.
So you were talking about turns 1 to 4.
So we start with like a very short 120 meters dash to turn one or Saint Devo, named after the chapel that's just tucked off in the apex. You can actually see it in the footage. It's a tight right hander straight off the grid and a total chaos magnet on lap one. Overtaking here is rare, risky, and usually ends up in carbon fiber confetti if anyone is gutsy enough. Then the cars power uphill the Beau Rivage, which sounds romantic, and it kind of is. The visual is beautiful, but it's just a blind, flat out blast with no room for error. And at the top of the hill, you swing into Massenet. I think it's named after the what's the guy, the French composer Massenet, because it's Monaco, and of course it has to
Right.
be fancy. It's a long
Of
sweeping
course.
left where grip is low and the elevation is tricky, and then boom, you're in Casino Square, absolute change of scenery with the most glamorous corners in F1. You got your marble hotels, designer stores, and a wildly difficult change of direction under braking. The car's light, the steering's twitchy, and the margin of error, as you know, basically zero.
Now we head into the loop of the note, and this is kind of where things get real. So, as Ashwati did mention, my French also isn't that great. While I did study it for, I think it was 4 years in school, again, it was just a way to get out of choosing Hindi.
Classic
So
Kevin.
my French isn't necessarily the best, but I am going to kind of add an accent and see if it kind of helps. So as we move towards Maribu Hote, so like I was saying, Maribu Hote starts it off. It's a tight downhill right where the camber pulls the car offline, and then comes the infamous Grand Hotel hairpin. I'm sure that if you've seen any footage of Monaco, you've seen vehicles go around this hairpin. It is
Yes.
the slowest corner in Formula One. It's so tight that teams have to build custom steering racks just to make it go all the way around.
Wow.
You can't see the end. You're almost on full lock, and yet somehow two cars still try to fit in there. I don't know how they do it. It looks crazy in the footage. I'm guessing the slow speeds kind of help, but
Yeah.
it's just like that's racing. That is literally motor racing. Next is the Maribu Bias. Yeah. Okay, you've got to help me out with that.
You got it. You got it.
Oh, I did? Okay, perfect. So, like I said, I'm just going to call it the MB. Then is Potier,
Yes.
which sets you up for the most cinematic moment in F1, the tunnel. You plunge from daylight into darkness at 280 kilometers an hour with massive compression and limited visibility. When you pop on the other side, it goes straight into a heavy braking for the Nouvelle chicane that's narrow, brutal, and bumpy. You get this wrong and you are in the wall. If you decide to just come in and go straight ahead, there is an escape road, but in Monaco, somehow you could end up doing both.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the tunnel, it reminds me of the previous, I think it was the 24 F2 session,
Yeah, Hajar. Hajar was the guy.
who had those amazing reflexes to kind of avoid somebody being stuck in the tunnel, right?
Yep.
An absolute masterclass in the reflexes that F1 drivers need to have. For those who haven't seen the video, the tunnel is kind of a sweeping tunnel, and there is limited visibility to what you can see ahead of you because, again, it is a sweeping right-hand kind of corner. There was a car that was stuck on the inside lane, and as Hajar was tunneling down the tunnel, tunneling down the tunnel, right? As he was, as he was tunneling down the tunnel, the car was stopped on the right-hand side, and the minute it kind of comes into his periphery, he does a quick kind of swipe to the left, and he ends up overtaking it. It could have been a nasty crash inside the tunnel, but thanks to his cat-like reflexes, like you've got to see the video to kind of put into perspective how quickly everything happened.
You're right. Like you said, quick, but you don't realize how quick until you see that video. And I feel like
Yeah.
this was the moment that sort of cemented his F1 trajectory as well,
Absolutely.
because he got a lot of popularity after that.
Absolutely. But where has that left him right now?
It's not too bad. He's still getting good positions and good points. He was P9 last race, I think. It's not the worst for a Racing Bulls driver.
I feel like the kind of hype that he had, obviously in F2, like I always talk about it, like translating into F1 is maybe not necessarily the most direct
Yeah, of
linear
course.
translation that you can expect. But I am super excited for the rookies, especially his performance, like, coming in on P9 itself is not something that we can scoff at, quite honestly speaking. He hasn't necessarily had the amount of time in this vehicle as much as Antonelli has, right?
Yeah.
So, again, we could obviously notice the performance difference. They are in two totally widely different vehicles, but I guess we're going to see some super exciting racing in the next few seasons, thanks to these rookies that we have. So then let's get back into where we were, which is tobacco, named after the old tobacco shop that's nearby.
Oh,
It's yeah,
okay.
it's a fast and deceptively tight left with barely any runoff. And finally, this swimming pool complex, left, right sequence that looks playful, but it's full commitment. The swimming pool section is named quite literally because there is an actual swimming pool right next to the track. It's part of the Monaco Yacht Club that sits in the harbor area.
And after the swimming pool, we now move to Sector 3, which is turns 15 to 19, La Rascas to the main straight. It's all about control here. La Rascas, named after the restaurant, on the inside of the turn, is a slow, tricky right hander where the track narrows massively. This is where drivers usually slide the rear end, praying for traction. And then you move on. Anthony Noakes, named after the man who founded the Monaco Grand Prix. It's a medium speed corner but super slippery on exit. And finally, you power past the pit wall and over the line. And if you're lucky, just kissing the barrier one last time. And that's it. This is a lap of Monaco. Just glamorous, historic, and still the hardest place to just get it right.
Absolutely.
So, what do you feel, Kevin? Like, what are your thoughts on the race this year?
Like I said, I'm super excited to see how this goes. I think there is a general consensus that at Monaco, it's kind of like you're driving a train because you're on rails. Because once you're kind of in those
Yeah,
positions are set. With the two pit stop strategy, I mean, the mandate that they have, it's going to be a super tight race. And when you add the rookies into the equation, it's going to be fun. But we are going to see a lot of repetitive lap on lap on lap action. At least that's what history has shown us. What about you? How do you feel about this race, and what are your thoughts?
I agree with most of what you said. I probably might just nap through some of the Monaco laps, but I feel like the quali is going to be more interesting than the race because, like you said, it's going to be a train, so it's so important to get P1 right for the McLarens or for Max or a surprising unknown contender.
Right.
So, because that decides a race. Excited to watch quali and a bit worried for the rookies out there and also drivers in new cars that they're not comfortable with yet, like Yuki Tsunoda.
Of course.
So, I hope they survive Monaco
Right.
and I hope the two pit stops. Like I feel the two pit stops are exciting, but I'm also a bit worried because it's just new ways for Ferrari to screw up. So I'm just cautiously optimistic at this point.
Let the record show that Ashwati is a die-hard Ferrari fan, by the way. So, Ferrari fans, don't come at us. She is one of your own. Okay? Now,
Yeah, we can make Ferrari fans can make fun of Ferrari, nobody else can.
right. Okay. So, on that note, let's kind of rewind back to the 1920s. Let's talk a little bit about the history of Monaco
All
for
right.
those of you who aren't familiar with it. Monaco is a tiny principality that's wedged between France, Italy, and the sea. It was already famous for its casinos, its royalty, and its luxury lifestyle, but back then, it wasn't necessarily known for racing.
Okay.
That changed thanks to one man, Anthony Knows, a motorsport enthusiast and a member of the wealthy Monaco elite. He wanted the newly formed automobile club, de Monaco, to gain international recognition. But that's only possible if there was a major motorsporting event held within Monaco. So Nose came up with the bold idea to build a racetrack using the actual streets of Monte Carlo. Prince Louis II gave it his blessing, and on April 14th, 1929, the first ever Monaco Grand Prix was held. In fact, the only year it was stopped was 2020 during the pandemic.
Wow, so it's been around for a while then.
Absolutely has.
And like I know Monaco, yeah, Monaco joined the official Formula One calendar in 1950, and while a lot of the other races have come and gone, Monaco has remained a fixture mostly unchanged. The circuit still follows the original straight layout with only minor tweaks for safety over the years. It's held races through war recovery, economic shifts, and even the rise of hybrid engines, always keeping its title as the jewel in F1's crown. It always takes place in the last weekend of May, along with the Indy 500 race and the Coca Cola 600, which is part of the NASCAR series. In fact, I think in 2017, Alonso was nominated by McLaren to drive for Indy 500, and his old teammate Jenson Button was the one off stand in for him at Monaco.
Oh wow, that's super interesting. So, what started as a stunt became the most prestigious race on the calendar. Not because it's the fastest, but because it's Monaco, and that somehow is enough.
Yep.
I know a lot of people have been complaining about how boring it can be. I mean, oh wow. I mean, yes, me. And that's because, as Nelson Piquet, a grandfather of Lily Verstappen, described it, it's like riding a bicycle in your living room.
Okay.
Monaco is the narrowest, most intense track in Formula One. The streets are so tight that there's barely any space for two cars side by side, and the elevation changes are constant. You're climbing past casinos, diving down towards the harbour, and barely holding on. Then there's the tunnel, dark, fast, and echoey. And when you're out, you're just blinded by sunlight. The grip changes instantly, it's chaotic, it's glamorous, and it's absolutely unforgiving. Monaco doesn't care how fast your car is, it only rewards perfection.
I absolutely get that, and it's a beautiful sight, right? Also, like if I feel like if you think of any movies that mention F1, it almost always has a shot of Monaco.
You're right.
It's sort of like it becomes equivalent of what F1 could be.
Absolutely.
And surprisingly, being the crown jewel, Monaco hasn't produced a ton of Formula One drivers, just four to be exact. You have Louis Chiron, Andre Testu, Olivier Peretta, and of course, our one and only Charles Leclerc, the golden boy. But don't let that number fool you. You know, the place is crawling with F1 drivers, like you said, who loves not having to pay income tax. And just a view of the sea, chilling by the yacht. It's not just a racetrack, it's a real estate haven for the fast and famous. And over the years, legends like Gilles Villeneuve and Ayrton Senna have called this place home. In fact, Senna once crashed out of the lead in 1988 and just walked straight to his apartment, vanishing into the walls like a ghost in a race suit. And then there's Kimi Raikkonen, who, after a mechanical failure in 2006, I think, didn't bother heading back to the garage. I love this. He just walked straight to his yacht, docked in the harbor, poured himself a drink, and watched the rest of the race from the deck. Just like I would do if I was there, and it's the kind of commute that Bangaloreans like Nisha dream about having, I'm sure.
At one point, we were all Bangaloreans. You know that, right?
Yes.
Like you and I.
Yes.
We've also, so we understand the commute. I'm sure that if any of our listeners are from Bangalore, I need you to kind of brace yourself because I'm going to say two magical words that are going to give you nightmares: silk and board. A silk board. Yeah, we'll give you a second to recover from your shock. And yeah, you were
I was
saying?
feeling I was getting goosebumps just thinking about Silkboard and waiting there for hours in a hot, sweaty auto.
It's the Bangalore experience. I mean, it's a rite of passage that you have to go through at some point in your Bangalore life.
And I wouldn't give it up for the world.
I mean, you did, but okay. Let's move on to the best moments. What do we have?
Okay, ouch, shots fired. But let's just go through like a highlight track of Monaco, right?
Right.
Some of the coolest stuff we've seen over the years. Like over the years, Monaco, like I said, has delivered some of the most iconic, ridiculous, and emotional moments in F1 history. Like you can't talk about this track without talking about Senna. In 1988, during qualifying, he set a pole lap just so far beyond anyone else, 1.5 seconds clear of his own teammate. Like, I know 1.5 seconds feel like it might be less, but like right now we can see people fighting for tenths of seconds. So 1.5 seconds is like 30 minutes in real time.
Right.
And I know that in some interviews, Senna later said that he was driving on another level, and honestly, No one's done anything quite like it since, because it looked like he was passing through the barriers like a ghost. And in this race, he was 50 seconds ahead of his teammate. Imagine 50 seconds. And apparently, he just had like tunnel vision of the track, not just the actual Monaco tunnel, but just that he saw everything and nothing at the same time. He felt like he wasn't consciously driving anymore, and then suddenly he lost concentration for a split second, crashed out at Portier, and that was it. That heartbreak actually just made him more hungrier. He came back and owned Monaco, winning it 5 years in a row from 1989 to 1993. That's why they still call him the King of Monaco, and he's still the only driver to have won there 6 times.
Oh wow, that is an absolute achievement on his bit. I think
Yep.
if you watch the documentary that was based on Senna that had come out on Netflix, there's a very good cinematic representation of what it is that you'd mentioned. The tunnel vision that he was kind of in, and it was very well captured basically. So for those of you who haven't, check out the documentary that's on. I mean, is it necessarily a documentary? I mean, it does talk about him. I guess it is a cinematic
It's
representation of.
fictionalized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is
You're right.
accurate.
Cinematic
Yeah,
representation
it is
works.
accurate in a lot of parts, but then again, we have to kind of call it what it is. It is a cinematic representation of the life and times of Ayrton Senna. Then we kind of move on to
Oh,
1992, the year Nigel Mansell, with a car that looked like it had jet fuel in the tank, caught up to Senna after a late pit stop.
right.
But then, with fresher tires and way more grip, he couldn't get past. Senna just parked the car on the racing line like a moving barricade. The gap, just zero point 0.2 seconds at the flag. Mansell looked exhausted. Senna looked like he could do it all over again.
Of course.
The 1996 Monaco Grand Prix, though, was absolute chaos. Only 3 cars crossed the finish line, the fewest in F1 history. It rained, drivers spun out left and right, and every big name fell. Michael Schumacher crashed on lap 1, Damon Hill's engine gave out while leading, Jean Alesi's suspension failed just as victory seemed certain. But from all that madness, Oliver Panis, who started 14th, kept it clean. He took a bold gamble to switch to slicks as the track tried, and somehow he won his one and only Formula One race.
Excellent. I hope history does not repeat itself this year. But I think we should also talk about 2009. Jenson Button dominated Monaco from pole to flag in that iconic Bronze GP car. But I think what fans really remember is what happened after the race. Instead of stopping on the main straight for the podium like he's supposed to in Monaco, he just pulled into the pit lane out of habit. He realized his mistake and he had to jog all the way in a full race suit, helmet in hand, all the way down the track to get to the royal box.
And that was a sight to see. Going back 3 years, 2006 was also controversial thanks to one Michael Schumacher. If new viewers think Max is bad, you would hate Michael. He was the champion of playing dirty games.
Wow.
And in the final moments of qualifying, Schumacher stopped his car suspiciously on track, bringing out the yellow flags, blocking Fernando Alonso from completing what looked like a faster lap. Michael claimed that it was just a mistake, but the stewards weren't buying it. They called it deliberate
Yeah.
and sent him to the back of the grid.
Yeah.
But in true Michael Schumacher fashion, he didn't give up. He just clawed his way back and finished fifth on a track where basically overtaking is a myth. And that's why Michael's Michael. You throw whatever it is that you want at him, and some people call it dirty, some people call it just that's just motorsport racing at its finest. But it is what it is. Fast forward to 2014, and the drama repeated. This time with Brocities, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. Rosberg went off at Marabou during the final run in Q3, bringing out yellow flags, just as Hamilton was on a flyer. Sounds familiar? Lewis wasn't convinced it was an innocent lockup, but the stewards cleared Nico. He won pole that year, putting him 4 points ahead in the championship and adding another crack on their disintegrating friendship.
Yeah, It's a bit sketchy, but still motorsport, I guess. Also, like, who can
Yep.
forget the iconic Daniel Ricciardo Monaco GP? Like, in 2018, Ricciardo delivered one of the most memorable performances. After securing the pole position with a record breaking lap, he led the race confidently until lap 28 when his Red Bull had an MG failure, it's like an engine failure, causing him approximately 25% of his power and leaving him with only 6 of his 8 gears. Despite this, Ricardo managed to fend off relentless pressure from Sebastian Vettel for the remaining 50 laps, just showcasing just Ricardo in his finest, his exceptional skill and composure. He crossed the finish line 7 seconds ahead, and this victory not only marked his first win in Monaco, but also served as redemption for his 2016 disappointment, where a pit stop error cost him the race. And of course, we remember this his iconic pose as he dove into that Red Bull swimming pool.
Oh, that was just. I think that iconic pose of his was the OG George Russell pose, if you know what I mean, right?
He
Arms out, legs together. That's where they got the inspiration from. So I guess credit where credit's due. Now, if we look at 2024, Charles Leclerc, after years of Monaco heartbreak, crashes, DNFs, pit stop disasters, 2024 was the year where Charles finally got his home win.
Yay!
From pole, under pressure, in front of his family and his hometown. The first Monegasque to win in Monaco since 1931. You could hear the emotions in his voice over the radio, and honestly, same. Absolutely the
Yep.
same for all of us who were watching. His teammate, Carlos Sainz, recovered from an early contact with Oscar Piastri and ended up securing third place, making it a double podium for the Scuderia. Oscar Piastri showed maturity beyond his years, holding off Sainz to claim second place. Lando Norris, though unable to challenge for the podium, maintained a strong pace to finish fourth. George Russell, Ashwathi's favorite driver,
Uh,
managed his tires expertly to fend off Max Verstappen, my favorite driver, and secured fifth place. Lewis Hamilton, after a late pit stop, couldn't make significant inroads and settled for seventh. A weekend to forget for Sergio Perez, my secret
eh.
favorite driver, was involved in a first lap crash with both Haas cars, leading to a red flag and his retirement. Max Verstappen, starting sixth,
Yep.
found overtaking impossible and remained there, expressing his frustration over team radio.
Classic Max. But I feel like I have to explicitly state that George Russell is not my favorite driver, in case it wasn't clear, because it's needed. But but going to Yuki, he actually was pretty impressive. He finished eighth and collected valuable points for the Visa RP. Daniel Ricciardo, however, couldn't break into top 10 and ended up 12th. Alex Albon secured the team's first points of the season with a solid ninth place finish. Logan Sargent, despite a brush with the wall, completed the race 15th, which is not too bad for him. For Alpine, this was like the round 500 of the French Civil War. Ocon made a way too ambitious dive on Gasly and ended up in the air literally. This move not only ended his race but also earned him a grid drop for the next one. Gasly still managed a point, but I would love to be a part of that debrief and just listen to them have at it. You also have Alonso, who finished outside the points in 11th. Lance Stroll's race was compromised by a puncture, putting him into 14th, I think. Valtteri Bottas showed some pace, finishing 13th. Zhou he was, I think, at 16th. You have both the Haas's, Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. They were both victims of the first lap chaos. They had to retire after a collision with your favorite Perez. Overall, not much to report on this race. All the drivers finished their mandatory pit stops on lap 1, and then it was, like you said, just a procession all following the race leader. I remember even Max saying that next time he's going to carry a pillow and just nap just because how boring it was. And I agree with him on that one.
I think this year Max will be carrying a pillow because obviously he is a new dad and sleepless nights are something that he is destined
Lack of sleep.
they are destined to for at least the next few years. So let's see how Max kind of rocks his way up into the Monaco GP. Well, at Monaco though, the teams usually flip their F1 script. It's not about power or top speed, it's about control, rhythm and perfection. So teams go all out on maximum downforce. You want the car glued to the road through those tight corners and over the curbs.
Mhm.
Not worrying about the drag on the straights because let's be honest, Monaco barely has any. The suspension setup though is another
Yeah,
big one. The track is bumpy, it's full of elevation changes, and the steering angle, especially at the hairpin, are extreme.
I can imagine that. And like the way you said it, I think grip is everything here. And since overtaking is near impossible, qualifying and track position matter more than race pace. You'll often see teams saving their softest tires just for that one golden lap in Q3 that could make or break everything. And this year, with the two mandatory pit stops, I feel like there's going to be a lot of strategy battles because an undercut is not going to work, and the pit
Mm-hmm.
stop time is crucial. Teams may want to hang out and wait for that safety car or red flag, which happens almost all the time, but it's a quite a risky move.
Yep.
It might work or it might not. And I think weather is also another wild card in Monaco. It's on the coast. You can either get the blazing sun, some showers, or even both within the same session. And since this track is so narrow, any change in condition can just throw strategy completely out of the window, especially if there's a sudden downpour in the tunnel or near the harbor section.
Absolutely. But do you know what the real battleground is?
What?
Qualifying.
Of course.
Monaco is a test of skill like no other, and it's not just for the drivers, but for the pit wall and garage too. You've got 20 cars fighting for clear air on a track that's barely wider than a driveway.
Mm.
Last year, some slow outlaps were only 20 seconds off the pace of a flying lap, which made it almost impossible to tell who was pushing and who wasn't. GPS tracking, which is usually called the team's lifeline, is nearly useless there. Thanks to the tall buildings and the tight corners, getting your driver out at the right time in the right pocket becomes a high stakes guessing game. And once you're in the race, strategy is all about track position. Tires last forever, overtaking is a myth, and one bad pit call can ruin everything. It's a race of millimeters, margins, and minds.
So here's what to expect this weekend. Monaco during race week is absolutely packed. It's only a 2.5 miles principality, so I'm not just talking about the grid. It's the biggest weekend on the Monaco calendar, and the traffic comes in every form. You got F1, F2, F3, the Porsche Super Cup, and even the historic Grand Prix, and sometimes Formula E, all squeezed into one tiny section of Monte Carlo in one tiny principality of Monaco. This means that the pedestrian paths are overflowing, the streets are jammed with luxury cars, because of course celebrities from everywhere are just pulling in, because it's quite flashy, and even the airspace just full of helicopters flying in from Nice. The rich don't do road traffic, obviously.
Obviously.
The yachts, the Port Hercule turns up into a floating city of super yachts. Some people book spots for a whole month because it's cheaper than the weekend rate. Wow. And the lowest priced, I think, is about 100,000 euros. And last time, even
It,
Latifi's dad rolled in with his 100-meter long mega yacht and parked it there for 3 days. That alone cost like 130,000 euros. I feel like that's the off season rate for 3 months.
That's an absolutely reasonable rate, if you ask me. For
Monaco? Yeah.
a 100-meter yacht.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like he got a good deal on it. So, here's actually something that a lot of fans might not know. I mean, until recently, Monaco was the only race on the F1 calendar that wasn't broadcast by the Formula One management. Instead, it was run by the local channel TMC. And let's just say coverage wasn't always the slickest. In 2021, though, we were watching this epic wheel to wheel moment
Yeah.
between Vettel and Gasly,
I
and
remember this.
it cuts away to the replay of Lance Stroll bouncing over a curb. Iconic.
But I think in 2023 that changed. FOM took over the Monaco broadcast, and honestly, you can feel the difference, right? That the coverage is sharper, the onboards actually show off the elevation changes, and the drone shot of that happen, just absolute chef's kiss. Monaco has always looked good, but now it feels good to watch too. I'm actually a bit not 100% sure of how the coverage is going to be this year. Just the way how it's been for the other races. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I've not been happy with the TV coverage this year.
This is the year that they are trying a lot of new things in terms of the coverage. Obviously, in every F1 season, it is a given that the first few races are going to be a little bit sketch until the kind of team gets into their groove. But
Yeah.
I think this year it's a lot more noticeable than the rest, given the cost of the F1 subscriptions this year also. As consumers, you are going to find a lot more people complaining because people feel like they're paying a higher premium, which they are, over the regular kind of cost that they'd pay before. So now let's move on to the F1 jargon. Now, you know that we love talking about safety. I especially do. Safety is like my point of passion when it comes to
Of
Formula One.
course.
Monaco takes it very seriously. For a track this wild and packed with action, the Principality brings out the big guns. There is an elite 85 member fire brigade on standby, and the ACM deploys over 650 of their most highly trained marshals in the sport. You'll definitely spot the firefighters because they're the ones in those shiny chrome helmets that look like those gritty, fireproof
Yeah.
Daft Punk cosplay. The helmets itself, that is the MSA Galley F1, originally made for the Ferry Fire Brigade back in the 70s. The mirror finish isn't just for style, it actually reflects heat and it gives off extra protection in case of a fire.
And the other thing which I find fun, which you mentioned, was because the circuit runs right next to the harbor, Monaco has something no other Grand Prix has. It has divers on standby, like actual scuba divers in the water, ready to go in case a car ends up in the harbor. Like, I see why they need it. It hasn't happened since the 50s, but they're still there, wetsuits and all, just in case someone decides to go full James Bond over it. And just, or if like you're a spectator on a yacht, you've had a few drinks, you're leaning over a bit too much just to get a better view, and then poof. So that's always fun to watch and just look for them in the coverage.
Absolutely. I think they are one of the more underrepresented divisions of the rescue mechanism that is there at Monaco. I was only made aware of them, I think, a few years ago, thanks to, I don't know if it was necessarily the official F1 channel that had some kind of a coverage put together on them, or one of the other channels that kind of find their way, just put out exclusively F1 content. But it was a great dive into the purpose that they serve at the track. Because as much as, like you'd mentioned, we haven't had an incident there in decades, it's still a safety mechanism that is there that kind of
100%.
does stay valid, in the latter case scenarios, like people getting a little bit too excited with their drink and ending up in the drink. So,
Yep.
on that note, I think it's about time for us to wrap up about the Monaco Grand Prix. We've been at this for nearly an hour, and I feel like we've genuinely got an hour more of content left to do. But
Yeah.
before we kind of talk your ears off, I will throw it back to Aswathy. What are your podium predictions for Monaco? And overall, what are your predictions on how you think it's going to be?
I think for the podium, like it's gonna be the McLarens and Max, and I feel like Max slightly has the upper hand here. Let's see. The order of the podium, so I'm gonna leave that up to the strategy calls. This race depends on the pit stops, what they decide to go with. I feel like it could be a McLaren sandwich with Oscar, Max, and Lando. I think I'm gonna lock that for my podium prediction. And I hope the Williams qualify well. I mean, they qualify well, so I hope they do well in the race as well without any major incidents. What is your prediction?
I am always going to say Max, 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 Super Max. He's always been somebody who's performed good on that track. He kind of finds his way to the front. He has a pretty good qualifying session, usually at Monaco, and he finds himself in a position where he finds
Yep.
himself up front most of the time. So once you kind of end up over there, then it isn't too much of an issue to kind of maintain your lead and kind of stay up front. So with that being the case, I think overall he has done well. He will kind of stay in the lead, and then it's just a matter of kind of, I want to see how this kind of pit stop strategy does end up playing out also. So with that being the case, I'm going to predict Max somewhere in the podium. The McLaren boys are good.
Of
I
course.
just genuinely want Williams to continue their kind of solid race pace that they've had, and their consistency that they're maintaining. I just want to see that into this race, because as much as the top three are fighting for things amongst themselves, great. I want to see how Williams and Ferrari kind of does this season. And yes, Ferrari does have very, very, very seasoned drivers, and it's a seasoned team that's been in Monaco for more races than anybody has. But with the new cars and the team dynamics, I want to see how it plays out, because I think progressively as we're going through the races, we can hear the frustrations that the drivers have. So it's going to come to a
Yeah.
point where you're either going to have them agreeing with each other, or there's just going to be a lot of infighting that's going to come out onto the radio, because we hear like 1/3 of the radio transmissions that there actually are, and we have zero idea about what happens in the debriefing, and you're not going to trust what comes on Drive to Survive to be an accurate representation of the matter. But the drivers are getting very vocal, and it could kind of end at a point where they're just going to be like, you know what, chuck team orders, I'm going to do my own thing, and it's not going to end well for anybody on the track if that's the case.
I think that, I mean, I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
that's bound to happen when the team isn't performing well.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the infighting sort of starts. And it's like also why I didn't mention Ferrari in the predictions, because they haven't been qualifying really well.
Yeah.
And with the qualies making all the difference, I'm not very optimistic. Even Charles Leclerc agrees with me, so let's see.
Right. Let's see indeed. I guess next week Nisha will try to come back, but honestly, I think both of us did a great job. So I think
Yeah,
I think amongst the two of us, we'll just take a quick vote, and I think we should just vote to replace her. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
of course, because it is F101 with friends, and we are the friends, so I feel like it's quite apt.
There you go. So, to our amazing listeners, what do you think? I mean, not about us replacing her, but drop your hot takes in the comments, send us a message, or tag us in your wildest predictions. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share F101 with friends, because this community is just getting started. So, if you have any questions or you want to be a friend of the pod, please reach out to us on Instagram, link in the description. Also, special shout out to Nisha, who handed over the reins this week for the podcast to us, and we'll be sure to hand it back to her when she gets back.
Yes, thank you for trusting us with it. And this is it. We've been your hosts, Aswathy,
And Kevin.
and we'll see you on the next episode of F101 with friends. Bye.
Bye.